difficulty hooking a Mac up with some computer issues, so
But you got it worked out.
I don't know, somehow it worked out. So
He's an avid gardener and coordinator of the Dubuque County Master Gardeners. While earning his master's degree in horticulture, he used drip irrigation to maintain his experimental plants and perform demonstrations. In his current landscape, he implements a variety of irrigation techniques with the recent dry summers. And if you have questions, you can ask them at any time. So
yeah, I prefer like a conversation as opposed to just like talking and just a presentation. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, conversation's great. So feel free to raise your hand and ask questions.
And you want me to pass things out? They've got their evaluation.
Yes, I'll hint to you when I need some help in a
Okay.
few minutes.
And I'll go like this when you have 10 minutes left?
Yep.
All right.
Yes, and 5, and then be like, Ray, you need
And
to
then
stop.
I'll ring the
Yeah, ring the bell.
cowbell.
There you go. So, yeah, again, I'm sorry about the delay in the presentation. But, yeah, we're going to talk today about garden irrigation. Before we dig into irrigation, we need to be a little humble. Irrigation obviously uses water. We use water too. We survive on water. And so even though we have the ability to freely apply water with irrigation, it's also our responsibility to use it wisely. So we're just going to keep that in the back of our minds. Also, we have other things that are playing into our precious resource in how it's fluctuating. So we have a local well technician that comes to our place to work on our well every so often. And he's like, we see the water levels in our wells going down. And when we look at our human influences on why that may be or why we may be affecting that, we have the things like urban parking lots. The storm drain infrastructure here, we don't only shed the water off the parking lot really quick. It gets frisked into a drain really quick and sent to a stream or a creek or a river, and so we don't keep that on the landscape to infiltrate as fast. Our farmers are out there using subsurface tile while the water does actually infiltrate into the soil out in the field. It's more quickly sent away and off the landscape than what it would be held there. We also have industrial usage, like our ethanol and biodiesel plants locally in the western side of the county. I mean, they use millions and millions and millions of gallons of water a year. So we just think about, and that's just one example. We have our weather variability, obviously, but then we also have something unique to Dubuque County in northeast Iowa, and that is our karst topography, or our limestone bedrock. And that's not quite as efficient at storing groundwater as what we would see in maybe western Iowa, where they have more glacial till, or and I know you guys probably don't know what that means, but it's more or less like granular material beneath the soil out there, and that stores water a lot better than our rocks and small caves that we have up here in Dubuque County. So we also have those things that influence the availability of water around here. Also, I want to highlight as well the reality of water application. Like, we sit there with our 3/4 inch garden hose, we can just like watch the water just spew out, and I'm like, that's a lot of water, to carry that with a 5-gallon pail. It takes a lot of effort. But it is a geologic material, and so when we think about this in terms of practical terms and what we're really trying to influence out there on the landscape, it's really heavy. And so I posted a picture of this. This is my research plot in graduate school, and this is what we call an irrigation riser at the corner of the plot. This pipe here is 4 inches around, and that's designed to carry irrigation water coming from this irrigation riser here. And by the end of the season, this thing has just a long, if you want to say, bend to it, because that water is just so heavy. Even though that pipe's designed to carry that, it's just that much water. Volume matters. So while we think that 3/4 inch garden hose can do a lot, and it does for the few plants that we are trying to water on the landscape, when we think about like fields or that large gardens, it takes a lot of water. So just to put that into perspective, and some people might argue that I'm oversimplifying this, but for practical sake, I put this in terms at which we could maybe interpret. So if we think silty clay loams, which are what most of our soils are here in the Dubuque region, the top 12 inches of soil can store 3 inches of water in the top foot of soil. So 2 of those 3 inches are actually available to plants. The other inch, the soil just holds on to and won't share with the plants. So that's just something to think about, that the soil is somewhat needy in itself and it won't share some of the water, but most of it will. So we're thinking about 3 inches of soil that it takes to fill that soil column with what it needs to store for those plants, or for it to give back to those plants. It's going to take 3 inches of water. And if we think about a football field, not everyone knows what an acre is anymore, but if we think about a football field, it takes 36,000 gallons to water a football field with 1 inch of water. So if we think about that, that's a lot of water. And if we're thinking about filling that 3 inches of water storage in the top foot of soil, multiply 36,000 by 3, that's over 100,000 gallons of water. So that's not supposed to happen.
It's been doing it randomly.
Is it? Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to share for us to be humble and think about, we can apply a lot of water and make a big difference for our plants, but really in the grand scheme of things, we're just a small drop in the pail still. On a lighter note, some things that we enjoy from irrigation. When I was in college, I got the opportunity to go out to California and see some strawberry production. So this is a 600 to 800 acre field. I'm not sure exactly anymore, but it was a large field of just strawberries. This whole thing was under drip irrigation. You can just see all the way up to the edge of this horizon here. There's just solid strawberries. And there's just row after row after row, and there's these irrigation pipes, which we're going to talk about today. That are out there. So we enjoy strawberries from irrigation. Here's a more local example. This is Gettings Gardens in northwest Iowa. They use these overhead irrigation pipes, or also called solid set irrigation pipes, out there. This isn't something that we're going to use in the garden, but it's just something to provide some perspective that we use a lot of irrigation to grow strawberries. If you're a sports fan, we also enjoy green grass. That's the Jack Trice Stadium just after they put out their new, they have a sports turf that was grown by the Horticulture farm. So we internally grew our own grass that they put on the new football field. And we're all familiar with this form of irrigation, the traditional watering can, putting it on our pot of flowers. I also just wanted to show a little more experience of what I've done in graduate school, so that when you look at what we're going to talk about today in terms of hands-on activities, what you can tell what experience I've come from in trying to assemble some of these systems. So we did a lot of research with crops on top of plastic. So we would have this mulch laying device that would put this black plastic down, and it would automatically put in this drip tape. And we would plant all of our rows of crops inside that plastic, and they were automatically irrigated. And anytime they needed water, you just turn it on. So, and we would lay acres of this stuff. This is one of our sweet potato fields that we put plastic and irrigation down. I didn't do as much with these systems, but who here has been to the Muscatine area? Nobody? Okay. I was going to say, down there, you'll probably see some of these things out in the fields down there. And the reason why is because they're a little on the unique side with their soils. They're actually an old sandbar off of the Mississippi. And so their soil, you can kind of see it in this picture here, that it looks like beach sand. And it's so sandy down there that they have to run these center pivots every 4 days in order to keep the crops alive. So, but the nice thing about this is they're not pulling from wells that are super, super deep in the ground. They only go 20 feet, and being that they're right off the Mississippi, they've got all the water that they need as long as the Mississippi's flowing. So that's kind of a unique example. It's not practical across Iowa on this larger scale because we don't have the water availability. But I did work with some of this irrigation. I have a picture of their soils over there in Muscatine. Oh, I don't know why it goes back. Yeah, their soil here, it's like beach sand. So like it's really, really coarse. So this was my experiment in graduate school. So I worked on cover crops, and I wasn't a big fan of having to go out there and because this is a lot of work to put all this pipe out there. So we put these solid set aluminum pipes out there, but the choice is, if your plot fails, you don't graduate school for another year. So I'm like, well, I guess we're going to irrigate then. So we make it grow. So anyway, so that's why that's out there. And yeah, I just wanted you to know that this is almost an acre-sized plot. This is probably like a quarter of what it actually was in the full photo. But it took that, just to water that full acre at one time, it took this 4-inch pipe coming out of the riser just to keep those sprinklers going. So if you think about this on a larger scale, we're talking about moving lots and lots of water. A funny story, this plot here, there was another one of these red risers over here, and this truck here is our research truck, and we had a research tech, and she was like, I don't know, a few inches taller than like an official like midget. She's like really, really short. So she couldn't see over the dash. And she turned the corner too sharp, and the pressure behind this riser, if you open this up all the way, it comes out at 300 gallons a minute at 90 pounds of pressure. So she peeled off the top of one of those, and the truck was the water was coming out the radiator, out the sides, out the wheel wells. There was no guessing where the water line break was. So anyway, this is a funny story. But anyway, my irrigation experience at home, this is one of my strawberry plots. We do overhead at home. I also do a form of drip with some of my landscape trees. And I just take a 5-gallon pail and fill it with water and put a 1/4-inch hole in the bottom, and it gradually drips that water down next to the trees so it doesn't run away. And it's a very concentrated application of that irrigation water. So something cheap. But it's effective at making sure that the water stays close to your plant. You get the max benefit of that water.
How long does it take to drip out of there?
I would say it takes 20 minutes. So it's still better though than like sitting there for 20 minutes with the hose. And when you have 23 trees, you know, like you can just go out there and it comes out of my hose at 7 gallons a minute. So you know you can fill up those water buckets really quick and walk away, and then not worry about it. And they're all getting their slow 5-gallon dose, as opposed to letting that 5 gallons just spew out on the ground and kind of flow away. So I'm glad you asked that question. So just like Tracy asked, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask. So now we're going to move into our irrigation technologies. We have 2 general types. We have the overhead, which is probably what most of us are familiar with. And then we have soil applied, which is more classified as drip. If you go out west into California, they'll talk about flood irrigation and stuff like that. It's not super practical around here in most scenarios, and also that's starting to be phased out more in those western states because it takes so much more water to do flood. So we're just going to focus on what's called soil applied or drip irrigation, and then overhead. So we're going to dig really deep into impact sprinklers. So who here's got impact sprinkler? Wow, no one waters anything. Okay, well I guess we're all going to start after this, right? Okay, yeah. So this is my tripod that I use at home. And there's some things that, these work nice in multiple ways because these are versatile in getting your water applied to many different crops. So in my garden, we have sunflowers, we have sweet corn, we have all kinds of different things, and the other sprinklers don't work as well because they're closer to the ground. So I can use this sprinkler out in my garden, I can gradually raise it up, and the crops aren't going to influence the distribution of the water. So that's what makes this really useful. At the same time too, it's a little inefficient because we imagine a square garden, a round circle, we have a lot of spaces that we're having overlap onto, grass or whatever. But they're cheap and effective. They're also adjustable with their spray pattern. I have these different circles here because a lot of us that put these out on our garden, we just hook up the hose. We might be like, yeah, looks good, and then walk away, right? And we think that we're getting a perfect coverage across the whole circle, right? But in reality, these actually have different, when the spray pattern comes out, there's different distribution levels across that spray pattern. So if we imagine this impact sprinkler sitting in the center of each one of these circles here, sometimes what we'll have is we can set this, and we'll see a long stream coming out, and it's just, the impulse sprinkler is just going around in a circle. And a lot of times what happens is there'll be a small, if you want to say, spray of water close to this as the impact head goes around. There's a small mist around it, but then that long beam hits the edge of the circle. And so a lot of times what we have is a lot of concentrated water in the center, and not a lot, and a lot of outside, and nothing in the center. So one way to evaluate this is just a simple rain gauge. Nothing technical, just a rain gauge. And what I've done out in my garden is I'll place one here, here, and here, and I'll see what the distribution is. And sometimes you're really surprised when you set it up. You're like, I think we're gonna, you adjust this, and I'll talk about the adjustments here in a second. You'll adjust that, and you're like, I think we got it. It's gonna be pretty even. And then you get the rain gauges. I just use mason jars, and I put them out there and see how even the distribution is. And sometimes you're like, wow, we're actually getting this. Sometimes if you adjust it differently, the center of the plot will have all the water, or the center of the spray beam will have all the water. You won't have anything around the actual sprinkler itself, and nothing on the outside. And then sometimes, if you really get it screwy, you'll just have everything in the center. So how we adjust this is, most impact sprinklers have two settings on them. One is the deflector plate. So this here is this upper plate here. And when the sprinkler's on, obviously we can't turn that on right now. But when the sprinkler's on, you'll see the beam go down, up as you move that deflector plate down. So I turn this dial and it gradually pushes that deflector plate down and it moves your stream. We imagine the sprinkler here, it moves it closer. So if your garden's smaller, you can bring that stream in a little bit. So that's usually the first setting that you adjust on this. The second setting that you adjust is the diffuser screw, and that's this little screw off to the side. I don't know if you can see that from where you're sitting there. But what happens is when you turn this in, what you're looking for is you're gradually trying to get a nice mist or distribution of water falling close, halfway between, and far out. And so you can turn that screw to adjust that in time. And then, do you have a question, Rhonda?
Yeah, a lot of the reading I've done is they don't recommend watering the overhead.
Sure.
So some water is just going to land on the leaves.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that with the drip option here. I'm glad you brought that up because that's an advantage of drip. And yes, we'll talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, as of right now, we're just diving into the overhead options. So it's 9:15, right? Our 10:15 when we stop. Okay. I just want to make sure I stay on time. I don't want the bell to be rung on. So anyway, so you just adjust this, and it takes a few different experiments with your rain gauges set out across the spray pattern here to adjust it so that you get it just right across that whole spray beam. I will say you'll never get it perfect. So I've tried. It doesn't work. But you'll eventually develop an eye for like, you know what? When you adjust this screw and you see that beam, you'll get an eye for like, okay, that's what it looked like last time I was doing this. And we'll get a pretty even distribution over that spray pattern. But it takes a little bit of experience with the sprinkler you have because each sprinkler is a little different. So the models usually perform the same. So if you get 3 of the same model, like I don't know if you saw that one picture back there with my strawberry patch and I have 3 of the same sprinkler, they all perform pretty much the same. But if you have a plastic one, a metal one, and another version of an impact, they all kind of perform a little different. So yeah, this is the impact sprinkler. And again, it's maybe not always the most efficient, but it's very versatile. It's easy to set up and move everywhere. You can see I use mine quite a bit.
Where can those be purchased?
I'm not recommending this place, but I purchased that at Tyson's. So they've since changed the heads on them now. They don't sell them with the same head and everything. But I know that they still sell that green tripod version at Tyson's.
Thank you.
So I'm not recommending them, but I know that you can purchase it there. So the other thing that we have is oscillating sprinklers. These are just a little more straightforward. You put them out in the garden, you set them out there, and they go back and forth. They have a really good even distribution pattern across these, individual ports on here. So there's not a lot you can do to adjust that evenness of pattern because it's already preset in here. So that's one thing you've got going for this, is it's really even. It may be a little bit more efficient for your square spaces. So if you imagine a square garden here, it doesn't do a perfect square because the center ports actually overshoot the garden a little bit and you won't get the corners, so it's not a perfect square, but maybe it's a little bit more efficient at applying water than the impact sprinkler. So you don't have as much waste. These have adjustments here, and this one actually says, when you're doing a full range back and forth, you can just set this on the corner of your flower bed and shoot it out, 10, 20 feet one way. They work great for that, but they don't work great when you get into tall crops, because once you get into tall crops like your tomatoes and stuff like that, it'll shoot off to one side and the other, and you won't get it into your garden. So the impact sprinkler is your friend there, where you can keep elevating that. I mean, you can put this on blocks and buckets and stuff like that, but in time it just gets really difficult. So, but for efficiency and evenness of spread, maybe this might be your option that you're looking for. And then we have walking sprinklers. So these here, who's seen these before? Yeah? Who here likes these things? Nobody. Oh, you like? Okay. I have applications where, well, you've seen them. How many people use them? I should ask that question. Okay, yeah. So this is a sprinkler that works for larger areas. It's more recommended for lawns. And the reason why is because it travels over a longer distance. So if you're not familiar with what happens, the water goes in the back of the sprinkler here. Never mind. So yeah, the water goes in the back of the sprinkler here, goes through, there's a gearbox in the back on these tires, these drive tires, and then once it does its thing in there and transferring some power to the wheels to go forward, this little tractor here, it goes across your lawn. This helicopter looking thing, we'll call it, spins. Excuse me. And so water goes through there, transfers power to the tires, it goes forward, and this spins around and round and round. The nice thing about this is that you can get a really even, nice distribution of water as long as you have full overlap. And so I have this visual here. Some folks just think if you start this at the corner of the garden and have it walk across your garden that you watered the whole thing and it's all really even. And for most people that's probably enough. When we were doing a strawberry plot at our house, it was real essential that all the strawberries got exactly the right amount of water. So we had to start the tractor way, way far away from the plot, and where the front of the water, if you want to say circle, was starting here, and then it would gradually walk through, and you can see how even that water is distributed across there. And then it would have to completely exit the garden before we would say, this is appropriately watered. So the distribution, really even, maybe not as efficient in smaller spaces. At the same time, you can really dial in how much water you want to put out in the garden. And you can do that. This has a gearbox on it that you can set the speed to go fast or slow. But you can, if you want to say, really finitely adjust that by how far you tip these, aluminum bars here. So the further you tip them this way, and you can make this fly across your lawn, and if you tip it like this, and this will just go really fast, and it'll just walk. You could, just observe it going, feet per minute. And then if you almost turn them straight up and down, this will turn, at like 1 RPM, or 60 RPM, something real, real slow. And this will take you many, many hours to get across the yard. But you can really put on a lot of water, and you can just walk away. So, and it's driven across the yard by, you put the front 2 tires here over your hose, and it just follows your hose. The box, I still have the box, and I won't show you it, but the box states that you can just make all kinds of circular patterns through your yard. That's maybe true for like the first 25, maybe 50 feet of hose. You could maybe do some fancy configuration, but really it does best going straight. So, yeah, I wouldn't anticipate it to get fancy. What else did I? Yeah, I would suggest it's limited to 100 feet of hose. Otherwise, it pulls too much hose behind it, and then it starts to slip in the mud in the garden because it is watering the soil it's walking on. And yeah, it just spins. So really, it only does about 100 feet. Low-lying crops only. Yeah, I haven't had any problems with it. It's really heavy, but it works. I got that one for $10 at Goodwill. It's pretty smart. So okay, now we've covered kind of the overhead technologies and the different, if you want to say, classes of irrigation. Now we're going to get into soil applied irrigation. This is what more folks are probably less familiar with. We hear a lot of folks talk about how efficient this is in water usage. And so when I was at the horticulture farm, working through grad school, we used a lot of this for the main reason that, well, a couple main reasons. One is you're not getting the leaves wet, like Rhonda was talking about. We'd have crops. Iowa's humid, and we'd often get a lot of moisture at random times of the year, but then other times we might see a 2-week span where we didn't have any moisture and we needed water out there. And with the humidity and stuff, we didn't want wet leaves. So this drip system puts the water right on the roots. There's no question about it. The other thing that's beneficial about it is you know, I showed you those pictures when I was in grad school of my large field and those 4-inch pipes, those huge pipes. We can irrigate the same stuff, or the same area, with only an 1-inch wide pipe. So we could irrigate a whole acre of crop on just an 1-inch wide pipe as opposed to those big 4-inch pipes. So this is really, really efficient. It took a lot less water and it was very targeted. So we used a lot of this for that purpose. The big drawback is that it's plastic. So depends upon where you're at in terms of your environmental goals and stuff like that. There is a lot of plastic usage with this. In theory, you can recycle it, and we've tried recycling portions of some of these. I'll get into it, but really, it's really hard to do. You'll have a lot of leaks and stuff like that. So here, I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to pass these around for you. No matter what we're, I'll have, well, actually, if you want to start handing these out here, I'll have you do this here. You want to put one of these plates on every table.
I would love to.
Okay. And then do you want to give one of these and one of these to everybody?
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be
To
great.
everybody or every table?
Everybody. Yeah, a table gets a plate, and then everybody gets one of those tapes. Here, okay.
You get a plate. You get a plate.
So, something I wanted to talk about is we have 2 different basic kinds of this soil applied irrigation. We have tapes or drip line, and you can see this whole line goes down individual rows, and there's emitters on there, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And then there's also microtubing, where you can take a main supply line, which is what this big black line is here. Excuse me. You can take this big black line, you can put an emitter on it, and you can direct exactly where the water's going to go. So you can see these individual tubes are going into these grow bags. I don't know what they're growing. One of them looks like roses. So you can really directly target where that water's going. But no matter which system you're using, you're going to need an initial setup at your water supply source. And there's going to be some main components that you're going to need. So this was at the horticulture farm. Granted, this was a more industrial case, but the same concepts apply to the home gardener. What you need for a drip irrigation system, and probably the most important, well, there's 2 things, is your filter. So this here, we need this because the individual emitters that are going to be in our drip line and the micro tubing that we have, the holes that give that water out to that plant are so small that they're really susceptible to plugging. And so these filters, they're like 10, 12 bucks a piece, and they come with different filter mesh sizes. This here is 155 mesh, and this is what you're going to need for drip irrigation. So it's a really, really fine mesh, and this is one of the smallest meshes that you can get. There's also 200 mesh if you really want to go that direction too. But 155 is the, if you want to say, the biggest size hole that you should look for. So, do you have a question?
Yeah, do you have to clean that out every so often?
Yeah, good question. Yes, you do. We actually have a hydrangea bed at the Arboretum, and the master gardeners that help with that found out that they had to clean that out, and I showed them how to do it. They were really baffled. It was kind of funny. But is Jean here? I don't mean to pick on Jean. Jean was really surprised. But anyway, yeah, there's 2 different ways to clean these out. And that's the nice thing about these filters is that they're not something that's disposable. This will be in your line. You take off this cap. The sediment will be inside the tube. and I'll pass these around in a second, but the sediment will be inside the tube. You can just take a spray hose and spray from the outside in, and all of that residue will fall to the center and then just fall out. So that's one way to clean it. If you have a lot of, and this, when you clean that with a spray hose too, that's for more fine sediment. So like rust, clays, those types of things will get caught up on this. If you have a lot of sand, an easy way to clean it out is there's a little plug at the tip. You just open this up, turn on the irrigation, and it just flushes everything out. So, but that doesn't always take care of your fine sediment that sticks to the filter. So, yeah, so that you do have to clean them out. It's important to do that every couple weeks. It really depends on your water source. So at the Arboretum, I suggested maybe they try it every 2 weeks, and if they're not seeing a lot of residue on the filter, then extend it out to a month. But we would use this here. You can see at the horticulture farm. Here's our filter here. We were using pond water, and so we didn't have a lot of sediment, but we had a lot of algae. So we had a different style filter inside here called a disc filter. Not as important for you guys, but there are disc filters out there. They were easier to clean with all the algae that would come through the line. So, but yeah, that's their filter. They had some other couplings. We won't get into that. After that, we have a pressure regulator. Can anyone guess? Well, you can all guess what a pressure regulator does from the name. But why is that important?
To get water from your one end to all the way to the other end of your garden and make it an even rate.
It does. It does. There's a more important reason I'm looking for from that.
So your lines don't fall apart?
You're right. So the lines don't blow apart. Yes. So with this type of irrigation material that we're using, and this is where we'll get into some of these parts. So I need to find my part here. So yeah, this here is irrigation drip line, and this is along. It's almost, if you want to say, inflatable. And you guys can, everyone can take this home with them today. This is yours to keep. But anyway, this drip line here, you can see the individual emitters on it there. And if you put 60-pound water through there, you can blow those up. Like, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Sally said, yes, you'll blow your lines up. And so the pressure regulator, it really doesn't, it's not that exciting. You wouldn't even know it's on there if you didn't know your lines are blowing up. But it's really important because it brings that water pressure from the high pressure coming from the source. So this is the source, so it came from the pond. It was pushed at a high pressure through the filter, which is important that that's still on the high pressure side. Then it goes to the pressure regulator, which then brings it down. And there's different pressure regulator PSIs. So, and it all depends on your drip tape you buy. So, you're speccing your system out starts with looking at your drip tape, and the person that sells you your drip tape will tell you what the PSI rating is. The PSI rating for this is 15. Sometimes it's 10. So here, what I got here is one that is, yeah, the 15 PSI. It says right on the side. They also, what do you want to say, are variable based on the amount of water that goes through. So that's also important. But if you get ones that have a garden hose fitting, normally they're going to be the right flow rate for a standard house. So, and I'm going to pass these around here in a minute. What was my other? I had another demonstration. Did you have a question?
Do they survive multiple seasons, or does it get solarized?
Good question. So this initial setup here survives many seasons. So you take care of it. Bring it in the wintertime, don't let it sit full of water, and freeze. Yeah, this lasts for a long time. From this point forward, when it's out in the drip field, that's subjective. There's lines that you can buy that are heavier duty, that are really heavy duty, like, they're really rigid. And they say that you can reuse them. But when I worked at the horticulture farm, 3 years later, they're like, well, they're supposed to be usable, but they're plugging, and a mouse chewed holes in 5 spots, and all those other things that come up. So, yeah, they're reusable, but sometimes it's just nicer to go with the thinner plastic and then just use new every year and just not worry about it. So, but that, everyone has their theory on what sustainability is. I'm not going down that road. Anyway, yeah, that's a great question. This stuff here is pretty much, disposable. So, yeah, we have filter. Then we have our So there's an arrow on the filter that tells you where it's going. So we have filter, pressure regulator. After that, you need an adapter that's going to take you to your drip line. So if you're a gardener that wants to just stick with the basics, I would recommend getting parts that all have garden hose fittings, which is what these are here. There's also pipe thread fittings too, and they look just like garden hose fittings, but pipe thread fittings are a little bit thinner. And I have them on here, and you won't see this from the audience, but even from, I'll talk about this here in a second. This meter here has pipe threadings, and I had to transfer it into garden hose threadings, or garden hose threads. So that's something that you have to be mindful of when you order these, is to make sure that if you want garden hose threads, to get those, and that it says when you order that you're getting those types of threads. And it's usually GHT, garden hose thread is the abbreviation.
Right.
But yeah.
Will this work with rain barrels at all, or is there not enough pressure?
It does. The question is whether you can get your rain barrel high enough. So if you just have an at level, it may work, but may not put out the amount that you want. I don't know. Sally, do you have any experience using a rain barrel?
Using a rain barrel, I would get yourself a submersible pump, which does have to be plugged in, but rain barrels are usually close enough to a structure, so you can submerge it down in there, which then that submersible pump is going to have a garden hose connected to it, so at that point that hose can come out and be connected to any of your irrigation. But also be mindful of how powerful that pump is. So if there's a submersible pump, you can drop down into your rain barrel and help feed it out as well. I'm sure there's other pumps you can get, smaller ones, to hook onto the bottom feed of where it usually comes out. I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not either. And when it comes to these systems here, I'll tell you, the amount of options are up to your imagination.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to start, I should have said this probably to start with. I'm just starting with a system that is basic, so that hopefully you all can kind of grasp what this is. And so that's why I'm using this system with garden hose threads, and I don't mean to throw too much jargon in there, but sometimes it can get complicated. But the realities you have to work through. But yes, I'm glad that you shared that. If you're in town and you're not on the farm, one additional thing that we have to add to this assembly here is a vacuum breaker. So let's say that the water pressure goes out, or the electricity goes out, and you don't want the water from your garden being backfed into the well. This vacuum breaker here is like $6, $7. You put this on here, and it will make sure that the water that is put out in the garden stays out there and doesn't get sucked back down the well if the electricity goes out and you didn't shut the well off or anything like that. So that's really important, especially in municipal areas, to have that on there. And then after we have the pressure regulator, it's pretty much up to you to decide how you're going to transfer that out to your drip irrigation. So this here is an adapter that goes from the pressure regulator out to drip tape. So what we do is we just, and I didn't have enough budget funds to get you all one of these pieces, but so I'm just demonstrating that now. But yeah, you just slide that on there, and this twist lock coupler, you just twist it on there, hand tighten it, and it's not going anywhere. So we went essentially from the spigot, filter, pressure regulator, adapter, and then you can go out to your drip. So something that, if you're a gardener that doesn't have, your garden close to your water source, the nice thing about garden hose threads is you can just put a garden hose in here, and you can leave this on your spigot, run a 50-foot garden hose, and then start your drip out in the garden. So, so that's one thing to take note of.
Do they sell like kits like with all those pieces?
They do. The challenge with it is it may not have every piece appropriate for your situation, because this really is, you're the engineer when it comes to these systems.
Oh, that's scary.
But a starter kit can help you, and then from there you can build off that knowledge. Like, this is what I need. But if you're just looking for a basic system, this is a really good setup here. I mean, everything in my hands here, this was under $45. So this here was $45. These here are 95 cents a piece. So when you get out to the garden, if you imagine this is your drip line out to the garden and you just want to stick with drip tape and not get into any other fancy fittings, you can just get a bunch of T's and a few elbows, and you can do your whole garden just off that with drip line and these couple things. These T's and elbows are recyclable year to year as long as you don't run over them with the lawnmower or that type of thing. They last a long time. You just unscrew them in the fall, pull out your drip tape, pitch the drip tape, and keep your fittings. And these actually aren't that expensive. But once you get out into the garden, then you can just it's like an erector set or Connects or those magnetics. From there, it's pretty simple. You just keep adding part on, and then you just add another piece of tubing on, and you can just build it from there. So from there, it gets pretty easy if you're doing drip tape. And with drip tape, remember it's better applied to rows. It's not targeted. So we're going to talk about the other micro irrigation here in a second that has the tubes and stuff like that. So that's drip tape. I'm going to take this off here. So yeah, this is how we did it out at the horticulture farm. This is drip tape. Something that we did different, doesn't look different from where you're at, is we had a header pipe, which is more of a rigid pipe that we used out in the field and did not have drip emitters in it. Those require, a special punch to get the individual fitting that hooks onto the drip tape to be put into that more rigid pipe. And so this is some of that header pipe. Requires more tools and things like that. It's a little more complicated. Yeah, you have a question?
Quick question. On the header type, do you have a recommendation on if it's above ground, you want it to be covered so that you're not tripping on it, you're not running over it with the lawnmower? Do you have any thoughts on what you put over it?
Yeah, honestly, it's whatever you prefer. When we were in the research field, we just let the header pipe sit out, and then obviously it was buried underneath the plastic because we had tools to do it, and that's where the roots were. That's just what we did. If you're in more of a manicured horticulture area, like the hydrangea bed out at the Arboretum, they have all of their header pipe buried. So, and that's just for aesthetics and safety factors too. It's really whatever you prefer. If you bury it in the soil, mice are less likely to chew on it because they do view this as a drinking fountain. They're like, all you gotta do is just bite a hole and you have free water. So that is a problem with them. So but outside of that's this is a system that is popular, and like I said, for many reasons. You can water a lot of space, really targeted. You don't get the leaves wet. And it makes good use. The only thing is like I said, there is a lot of plastic use with it, because this is just pretty much disposable. So
Can you use regular garden hose for the header pipe, or?
you can if you're wanting to, like, let's say you're the water source and I'm the garden. You can use the garden hose to transfer the water from the water source to the garden. But once you get out to the garden, the header pipe usually is something that's a one-time use thing. You can reuse these, and we tried at the horticulture farm to reuse them. We'd roll them up in the fall in these big coils and put them in the shop and store them. And we're like, yeah, we're just going to save that extra $200 it took to water that half an acre and just reuse the header pipe. But then you bring it out, and next spring you turn it on, and there's a leak here, and a mouse chewed a hole here, and there's a kink somewhere else. So it just becomes, like I said, it's up to you and what you want to budget for and what you're, 5 or 10 minutes? Perfect. Okay, great. So now we're going to move on to, is there any other questions in relation to this?
Well, we were listening, so I understand how customizable this would be, but how does it relate compared to a soaking?
Same concept. The soaking hose maybe doesn't involve all the individual fittings and stuff like that. You just put that out there and in coils or whatever around your plants, and it emits water just like the drip emitters do in this tape that everyone has a sample of. So same exact concept.
Can I weigh in on that?
Sure.
I found investing in the soaker hoses is it's more expensive. So, yeah, and especially if you're doing a lot of it, the soaker hoses are more expensive. And I think they would last
So the 100-foot roll I bought today, I want to say it was like, this is 50 feet of it left, but I want to say this 100-foot roll was like 12, 15 bucks. So, and that's a 100-foot roll, but if you have a 10 by 10 garden and you're watering every foot spacing, 10 of those, there's $13 or 15 bucks or whatever. So,
Ray, do they have them? Karen's got a question here.
oh, yeah.
So purchasing that, is Farm Tech pretty reasonable, or where do you generally get a lot of your
I know
stuff?
Farm Tech had that. I haven't shopped there, so I don't
Okay.
know. I know they used to carry it. This, and I'm not endorsing the place, but it's just a place I found on the internet. It's called Drip Depot, and they specialize in
Drip Depot?
Drip Depot. Yep, that's where this came from, and they specialize in small gardeners all the way up to industrial, field-grown, plants and stuff like that. So yeah, great question.
Okay.
So just to show you a little bit what happens underneath the soil, when I was at the college, we put some dye through the lines and then ran the irrigation. So we had 12-inch spacing emitters. So this here, what you guys have is 6-inch spacing emitters, is how far apart the emitters are in the tape. So it comes in different widths or lengths between emitters. So this is 12-inch spacing. You can see where the blue dye came out. We put that water on for 2 hours and where that water was deposited. Here we put that 12-inch spacing for 4 hours. You can see where the water was deposited. Same thing with 8-inch spacing. You can see the similar pattern there. I myself like the closer spacing just because if one of the emitters gets plugged, you don't see it out in the garden, you don't notice it, but you have something close by to take that up. So yeah, we talked about drip. Oh, there was something I wanted to show you really quick as part of an activity. I probably lost my part talking with you about it. So they sell plugs. You can imagine building this line, plugging in your tape, running this down your garden. At the end of the garden row, what do? You can't just leave it open. Water's just going to pour out. So they sell plugs that go in the end. I don't know how many cents they are. But really, an easier way to just do this, and you can all do this, I provided some tape with you. There's a short piece of tape and a long piece of tape. All you do is you take the end of the tape, roll it twice, and then you fold it in half. And this tape's a little bit more heavy duty, but fold it in half and then stick it inside the small itty bitty piece. And it's plugged. So I don't know whether they're 30 cents or whatever a piece, but yeah, something really easy. You don't have to buy that part. They sell them because people will buy them. But really, when you're in the garden, just snip an inch piece off at the end and just slide it over the end. Kink it over twice. Perfectly watertight. So we're also going to talk about the microtubing. And so I didn't have enough budget for everybody to build a microtubing assembly. But at least, hopefully, a couple people at your table can kind of play with the parts and get an idea as to what this is. So in microtubing, what we have is we have a main supply line. So that's what this heavy-duty line is. And usually these are more permanent systems. So like at the Arboretum, they're leaving this system buried in the ground. And they're leaving the microtubes out there. Or either that in greenhouse production, they'll use these in hanging baskets. So these will be suspended in the greenhouse permanently, and they'll put these drip tubes in each one of the hanging baskets. So we're just going to go through what goes into the parts of an individual drip assembly. Like I said, this is just one method as to how to build one. But what we have first is our line, which you guys don't have this, but we have a line. And when we're out in the field, we have to poke a hole in that. I didn't get the punch, but there's a punch that you use to punch a hole in it. And then we have this barbed fitting. There's a double barbed fitting. What we'll do is we'll poke that into that supply line. And on the other side, we'll take this spaghetti tubing, micro tubing, whatever you want to call it, and put that on the bar. So I encourage you guys to play with these parts that are on your table. So yeah, you put that's plugged into your line. And then from there, what we have is we have an emitter. So can anyone guess what this thing does other than just look pretty? No guesses?
It emits.
It does. It emits. Yeah, you're right. So what this does is if you remember, this assembly up at our water supply source brought this down to a 15 psi rating for our water. And to just run water out at 15 psi gets to be a lot of water on the landscape. And so we want it to come out in a slower fashion. These individual pieces are calibrated to emit a certain amount of water. And so they're spec'd out when you buy them from your supply source. So the green ones here, they say on this side, at least they did. Well, the bag said it for me. Yeah, I see that. The other brand that I had had these coming out at half a gallon or 2 liters per hour. So that's what the green is if you want your plant to have 2 liters or half a gallon of water per hour that your system is on, you put this on for your plant. We'll pretend that that's not giving us problems. So anyway, we put that on. Now the other color, this is 4 liters per hour, if I remember right, and this also says normal, but anyway, this is the red one is a higher rate. So this is 4 liters per hour or 1 gallon per hour. So you put that on there if you want your plant to have more water while your system is on. And then there's also another little emitter, and this one's got little threads on it. You put that on the end of that tube. And this here goes from 1 gallon up. So, and how you adjust that is you turn this all the way close. So you turn it all the way clockwise, tight, and then for every 2 clicks up, you go half a gallon more. So you count 2 clicks, starts at a gallon, you go 2 more clicks, you get another half a gallon, another 2 clicks, you get 2 gallons. So this is, for everything above, what the green and red can do. So there's different options, and like I said, these are limited by your imagination. You can find many different companies, they all, you just have to look at the specs, and the bag will tell you if you just happen to get some in your garage and you didn't remember what you ordered. But yeah, the specs tell you what each one of these are pre-calibrated to do. So after you put on your emitter, it's nice to just set it out there and forget about it, right? But we know that that's not practical, so you have to put it on a drip stake to anchor it next to your plant. So that's what this is. You slide that drip tubing onto the drip stake, and you park that next to your plant. And whenever your irrigation system comes on, you know that right there, this is depositing half a gallon, or whatever you have the variable rate emitter set at out there to distribute your water. So this is the one example of, if you want to say, that micro tube irrigation. It's very targeted. They use this a lot in tree production, in pots, hanging baskets, things where there's a lot of containers. They can highly regulate where that water's going. Great. So one last thing I want to talk about are tools for efficiency. And there are water timers out there. This is a very cheap option. Costs about $12. It's a little timer, and you just put it on there, and it just times. You want it to shut off in 2 hours, it'll do that. And that's very nice. At the same time, too, we have other programmable ones. So this is a very cheap $10 one, or $12, whatever. This here is like a $30 one. They can go into the hundreds of dollars. So your imagination is a limitation on where you can go with electronic timers. But there's also metering valves. I don't know where I set my metering valve. Oh, here it is. So I like this because in certain scenarios, I like knowing exactly what the amount of water I'm putting on in my garden. So I like to use this on my impact sprinkler, and I also like to use this on my walking sprinkler because I know after 1,500 gallons it goes about 75 feet at my standard rate. So I like this. This is a simpler thing, but they're hard to find. They're a little expensive. This is like an $80 meter, but they're simple. There's not hardly anything that can go wrong with them. They have some internal components, but you set the dial as to how many gallons you want, and from there you go. So I don't want the bell to ring on me. So thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you being here.
I just read the directions. I was supposed to give you all a ticket now, too, so if you would grab one of these on your way out. Do you know where your next sessions are? Thank you very much, Ray.
Yes.